Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Pod School Podcast. Ooh, this is exciting. You and me sitting down having a yap about podcasting in the very first official episode. Each week on this show, I am going to be giving you one simple, actionable tip that will help you improve the quality of your podcast. And this week, it is all about the art of performance. How wanky. That, however, is the goal, not to be wanky. When you're podcasting, just as in radio, the goal is really to sound like you are having a conversation with the person listening on the other end. You desperately want those emails from listeners that say, oh my goodness, it feels like you're speaking just to me. I feel like you and I are old mates. That is the sort of holy grail of audience connection. And the way to do that is to be natural and be yourself, but it is very important to remember that a podcast is a show and you have to treat it as such. You don't need to roll on in like sort of Richard Simmons, hello, or get the jazz hands out or the sort of Guy Smiley sprinkle. It doesn't need to be OTT, but there is a little additional bit of power and emphasis and excitement in your voice that you need to put in there when you are doing a podcast. The truth is that when it gets to the listener, it will have burnt off, but you need to be a little bit more energetic to make sure that you're engaging and interesting to the person who's listening to you. If you sort of talk at the normal conversational tone that you would normally talk with people at the cafe or something, it's just not going to grab people. It's a really subtle change, and really if you start to be a bit more conscious of it, you will naturally change. And often, because a lot of podcasts are just one person and a microphone, it can be very unnatural to talk to nobody and to try and get that natural conversational tone in your voice because there's no other human sitting across from you. There's no other warm body to react to. So it's really important that you try and get as much of that energy into your voice as possible without overdoing it, because nothing turns people off quite like that. Your content obviously is so important in a show, but so is the way that you draw your listeners in, and that is going to come entirely down to your performance and how you engage your audience. So remember, when you are podcasting, it's a show. Even though it's not in a radio studio and you're not in a commercial radio network, it is still really important that it sounds polished, and the way to do that is to really perform, but to be conscious of the fact that you still need to sound natural. Give it a try and record some stuff. This is the great joy of podcasting, is that you can give it 98,000 cracks and nobody has to hear anything but the one take that worked. So play around with different styles of performance and listen to your show critically. You know, that's a really important part of the process of becoming a better performer, is going through that painful process that none of us like of listening to ourselves on tape. When you listen to yourself critically, you will pick up certain things that you didn't notice before. When I first started in radio when I was 20, I had the worst laugh of all time. I sounded like a donkey choking because I had never really thought about how my laugh sounded when it got to people's ears, because it never really mattered. It doesn't matter when you're in the pub or when you're talking to mates, but when you're actually in people's ear holes in this much of an intimate way, that stuff matters. So listen back to yourself and be critical about that and think, oh, does this sound a bit dull? And if it does, just try and amp it up a couple of degrees to make that difference. It is not just you yapping into a microphone or recording yourself for posterity. It is you engaging an audience and performing to them. So it's really important to do that to connect. And that's it for today's episode. You can always head to podschoolpodcast.com to find the show notes for each episode. There's a contact bar there, and please, I would love it if you have a specific question, if you shot me an email there and I'll answer it on the podcast and let you know when your question is featured. You can also head to podschool.com.au. That is my online podcasting course where I go through everything step by step from the very beginning of creating an idea all the way to turning your podcast into a business. Next week on the show, I'm going to be talking about the most important word you can use in your podcast to connect with your audience. So don't forget to subscribe to the show, and I'll hopefully see you next week. Until then, happy podcasting.
That's all for today.